This is Melissa, and today is the 5th of July, 2026. I hope that you are all doing well. Today's Redux is one that Stuart in England just cleaned up for me. I received it the other day, and I like it. It's from June 18, 2007, and this is before Alan had his own show on RBN radio. But he was covering for Michael Herzog and John Stadtmiller when they had gone up to New Hampshire to cover a story of Ed and Elaine Brown. And so for the first section here, he is kind of sharing the hosting of the Michael Herzog show, and then he continued on Stadtmiller's show by himself. And Herzog and Stadtmiller called in from New Hampshire to let Alan and the listeners know what was going on up there. So I appreciate Stuart not only cleaned up the audio, but he also cut out all of the ad breaks and some of the other interaction of hosts who were piping up here and there. So he took something that was well over 3 hours in total and put it down to under 2. And so I am also not going to add too much to this to keep it tight. What you'll see, I added a few little images to the thumbnail with featuring Alan's picture that Stuart used, and I used a few illustrations to show what happened to Ed and Elaine Brown. Who were Ed and Elaine Brown? They were tax evaders. They were behind on their federal income tax by over $1 million. Now, just kind of an interesting background, because I didn't really, I couldn't really remember who they were, and they were I think they had businesses in dental practice and an extermination practice. I thought that was a funny combination of businesses. But they had decided that they didn't want to pay income tax because it wasn't legal. They were involved in two groups that have sprung up in the last few decades, the sovereign citizen movement and the militia movement. And Alan said an interesting thing here. He said we could learn to say no. And in thinking of what happened to Ed and Elaine Brown in the time after this broadcast on the 18th of June, 2007, I thought I would just add the caution there to be careful what you say no to. It might be a good idea if the no springs from something deeply personal. And who is it affecting? Is it you and your family? How does your family feel about it? There was a sovereign citizen tax, I don't know what you deny, or somebody who wasn't going to pay his taxes, and he communicated with Alan often and said Alan should be supporting what he was doing and telling all of his listeners not to pay their taxes. Now, subsequently, this man's wife was arrested and spent a number of years in prison for not paying taxes. I don't think the man himself ever ended up in prison. But this is what happens when you say no and involve your family members. I don't really know how his wife felt about that. Didn't follow up on that story. But what happened to Ed and Elaine Brown is that they holed up in their home with a lot of guns, stockpiles, explosives, all kinds of weaponry. And that was when Stadtmiller and Herzog went up to just see what was going on and cover the story. In October of that year, I guess they were FBI, dressed as supporters. I don't know what that means. They just took their uniform off and put on normal street clothes, but they were able to get in and arrest the Browns without incident. There's an odd little story. I may put it here if you're interested at all in this. Some nomad blogger went to visit them, and he, I guess it was Brown, said that he probably wouldn't ever leave the property alive. He'd been there for 6 months, and the U.S. Marshals and New Hampshire police dropped by frequently. He told us this would end in violence. It's the only way. Let them shoot me, let them shoot my wife. For each of us, 5 of them die. I'll take that exchange any day, gentlemen. Well, what happened is that he and his wife were convicted in 2009. His wife, Elaine, went to prison, and she was released in 2020 for time served, etc. But Ed Brown himself ended up having 17 more years added to the sentence. I'm not sure how that happened. But he is not due to be released until 2034, when he will be 92 years old. And evidently his wife has sued for divorce. I will also link here to something that I saw that shows the home of that has been purchased. It was a huge home. They built it. It has like foot-thick concrete walls. It's turreted, meaning it has like the lookout, the castle lookout tower on top. I believe that is the 5th floor of the house. It's an enormous property, 7,500 square feet on 103 acres. And so someone bought it. It sold most recently last year, I think, for $1.2 million, with its new amenities that include a granite countertops, marble walls in the bathroom, marble floors, a steam room, an artist studio, 4 fireplaces. So that sold last year. And what I am telling the people who purchased the home last year is pay your taxes. Or not. Your no should be a very personal no. People get used. The sovereign citizen movement, just one quick word on that. That's been around for a few decades, and lots of people have gotten pulled into it. It has all manner of QAnon, what they call conspiracy theories. And there are a lot of people who have argued with Alan, argued with me till they're blue in the face about why they don't have to pay income taxes. Just remember, your no needs to be something that you should support. And don't get caught up in following other people. I'll post a link to the Sovereign Citizen Movement page on Wiki. I want to point out here, it says sovereign citizen groups, notably that led in Texas by, quote, gurus David and Bonnie Strait, a married couple, convinced parents whose children were removed from their custody that Child Protective Services engages in child trafficking and encouraged them to kidnap their children. The belief that child protection agencies are involved in crimes against children is also consistent with QAnon ideology. Well, I will leave my comment about what child protection agencies are involved in unsaid. But I will tell you that David Strait and Bonnie Strait actually lived in the town that I live in now. I don't know them. I didn't know them, but I knew people who knew them. And so I know that David Strait passed away a year or so ago. And Bonnie Strait, I heard from someone who knows her that she is in prison again for carrying a firearm into the courthouse. Don't be a follower. Your no should spring from you and what you hold to be true for yourself. And think carefully about what you involve your family in, too, your spouse and your children. So it made me think about the fellow who got arrested for brandishing a gun going into the pizza outlet. I think it was in the Washington, D.C. area, or somewhere. His name was Edgar Madison Welch, and he was a follower of Alex Jones. And in 2016, he went into, there was a Pizzagate shooting there that he was involved in at the Comet Ping Pong, where he believed stories that he had heard on InfoWars that there were underground tunnels and they were trafficking children there. And he was arrested. Very sad story. So he pled guilty in 2017. He served time in prison until 2020. He violated probation and was out with some friends last year, 2025, and they were stopped by some kind of law enforcement agency who recognized him and went to arrest him, and Edgar Madison Welch pulled out a gun, pointed it at them, and he was shot by those police in a routine traffic stop and died 2 days later from his injuries. Now, we can't speak to the mental health of Bonnie and David Strait, or Edgar Madison Welch, or the people who have followed Alex Jones to the Capitol on January 6th of 2021, or who got involved in a number of things regarding, the sovereign citizen movement and the Republic of Texas following David and Bonnie Strait. If you think that you're a sovereign citizen, I would just encourage you to look up the word citizen and consider what that means, and look up the word sovereign and consider what that means. You can say no just for yourself. You don't need to be involved in a movement. So a little piece of news here. The Onion's InfoWars parody is here. This is July 2, 2026. Alex Jones is going to hate it. The satirical side is fighting to officially take over InfoWars. In the meantime, CEO Ben Collins says the new show will mock how, and I won't use his language, but he says how effing stupid conspiratorial brain rot has become. So that's enough said on an already long talk. I hope that you have a good week, and thank you for your support. I don't think that you'll go wrong listening to Alan Watt when he tells you to say no. I'm just adding that caveat there. Who are you saying no to? Why are you saying no? What are the ramifications for yourself and those you love? Movements, all of them. Not paying taxes, militias, sovereign citizen movements. If you dig deep enough, you are going to find that this was created to herd you in and to herd you into a world of trouble. Take care.
I think we're back. All right. Hello, America. Tim Wingate back with you on the Michael Herzog American Awakening program here on RBN Live. My friend Alan Watt, you are not a stranger to the show, I understand. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Yeah.
Good. Good. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you on the occasion or two that I have had. And, you're familiar, I would hope, are you familiar? I should just phrase it as a question. Are you familiar with the Ed and Elaine Brown situation in New Hampshire?
Yeah, pretty well. One of many. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, one of many, yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. They're not the only ones who've had this kind of a situation.
Yeah, it's been going on for years. generally quietly, and most people simply cave in and give up, and that's what governments are now used to.
Yeah, that brings up a kind of a speculative question. What do you think governments, possibly there in Canada, U.S., when people start standing up more and more like Ed and Elaine, or doing as I, raise the possibilities of different freedom shenanigans, what do you think the government response will be?
Well, they've told us what it will be. All NATO countries have run on the same agenda because there are no independent countries anymore, in fact. There haven't been for a while, and they haven't openly declared it to the public. They're conditioning us to accept it with little pieces of news and propaganda, but they haven't openly said to the public that we're already international, and they won't until the U.S. has finished its job in the Middle East. However, you're running on the same system as Britain, that published in the newspapers from the Ministry of Defense, which writes up the bills for NATO, and the U.S. is part of NATO, their forecast for the next 20 or 30 years, and it's nothing but what they see as public unrest, uprising, flash mobs they call it, and the responses that they will have to do to maintain order in society. Now, they don't say what's going to happen to make that Joe Sixpack and Jane Champagne stand up and start protesting, but obviously, well, we do know what's going to happen is they change the whole system in which we live, from one reward system of earning money and being a wage slave to the next step, which is to work for the world state. So they've forecast a world of upheavals, unrest, spontaneous violence, and they're prepared in their own statements to use neutrino bombs on the general public, and that's from the top Ministry of Defense Department for Britain.
So in essence, they're telling us that we are going to have to comply,
yep,
or they'll kill us.
That's it.
Well, when somebody issues that kind of a challenge to me, my immediate response is, well, then if I don't kill you first.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this is why I've often believed that the day of the direct confrontation is over, and people need to start studying different techniques, such as that Michael Collins used in Ireland against the British.
Yeah, well, the thing is, too, you got to remember, this is not a recent takeover of a government anywhere.
Right.
This has been going on for centuries. And people forget that in the United States alone, there was another revolution in 1801 when a group tried to take over and be the war hawks, basically, and go their own direction. And there was a civil revolution which got it back to the two-party system again. Jefferson played a big hand in getting it back. But they were well aware even then that there was a globalist society with a globalist agenda that was going to use all the big nations to further their planetary takeover, basically, with a new system of control, with science backing them up. Very Darwinistic in its agenda, very cold and ruthless, and very power-hungry. A belief that those who had the intellect and had acquired the wealth had the right to rule over the rest of the public and decide the future for everyone.
And these people that you were talking about go by different names.
There's many societies, and that's just it. You see, what they're composed of really are the psychopathic elements that you'll find within every group or people or creed. There's always an element of the psychopath. We all have met them in school.
Sure, we call them bullies.
They're bullies.
And we have an epidemic of bullying in our society, especially in jobs where they're highly competitive.
Yes, and there's no doubt about it. This whole system, actually, that we think is ours is not ours at all. It's theirs. They gave us the culture. They train us at school to go out and compete, and success is the whole name of the game, to get to the top by every means possible. If you look at all the famous people, pretty well the old families in the U.S. or the British or any other government, the hereditary dynasties that you see in politics now and then, they all started off as either pirates, buccaneers, freebooters, dope sellers, whatever, warmongers.
Wasn't the Thomas Aquinas who basically told the story of the pirate and the emperor?
Yes, yeah, and even that was an old story long before him. So these are, in fact, even those stories came from ancient Egypt. There's nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same system of profit, debt, and whoever runs the system of money and debt. In fact, money, to be honest with you, money is the key to all things. In the system, it's something which would always be taken over by the clever psychopaths who understand how to manipulate people through money and how to bamboozle them by pretending that there's a science involved. When anything is so complex the average person can't understand it, you're being fooled, whether it's law, money, or anything else.
That's a very good insight on that. You made me think of a question here as you were talking about that they created our society. They've they've created all of this. I have I've questioned the issue of the Masonic orders. We can see the evidence of Masonry throughout our society. We have great public works that have Mason symbology on it. You have police patches that proudly display the compass and the square.
Yeah, if you look at the British system with, in fact, the British Commonwealth system, the police have a band around their hats with the checkerboard right around it. Yeah.
Yeah, we have that in Chicago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the question I have then is, what right do we have to rebel against I call them the system lords?
Well, I always tell people, when you rebel against something, you better get your facts right of what you're rebelling against and what you're trying to keep or save or even produce. Because people don't. And even the Founding Fathers said the same thing, that it took them 20, 30 years of organization before they had the revolution.
That's true.
Otherwise, you're an unorganized mob. If you're not organized, you get walked over by professionally trained standing armies.
That's a good thing. Hold that thought. Folks, we'll come back after the break. Stick with us. Tim Wingate here, Alan Watt on the Michael Herzog American Awakening on RBN. All right, good afternoon, America. Tim Wingate here on the Michael Herzog Show, American Awakening. We're talking with Alan Watt. You mentioned something that sparked another little reference to me about the Founding Fathers recognizing that the planning for the American War for Independence took many years. I do know for sure that John Adams wrote that he believed that the revolution actually started January 30th, 1750, and that's when Jonathan Mayhew preached at the time, a very important sermon dealing with revolution and the right of the king to rule and a free man's responsibility and a number of other subjects. And so we can easily see that it was at least, as you said, 25 to 30 years from 1750 to 1776 and even before, as these ideas and these thoughts started to circulate in the minds of the Founding Fathers. So that brings us back to the issue and the question of what is it that we need to be careful of as we are trying to resist against these people who have created this system that we are benefiting from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing is, that's just it. We can't say this is the good bit, this is the bad bit. I like this, I'll save that, I'll throw this away. Our whole culture really is not our culture at all. It's been promoted and marketed to us from cartoons right up through adulthood. Propaganda is put over through fiction, in fact, is the best means of implanting ideas in someone's mind. via emotion. That's what drama is for. And most drama, that's why there's so many cop shows and hospital shows and social worker shows on television. It's propaganda to instill in you that the state is taking charge of every aspect, major aspect of your life, from cradle to grave. And people have come to expect that. And now, I mean, in 30 years, people now are booking their parents into old age homes as a normal thing to do, rather than take care of them at home. And that's what the elite wanted, because they wanted the male and the female in the workforce both paying taxes to the system. And then when there's no family unit left, there's no one to stand up for the individual between the government and the individual. This was all planned and written about over 100 years ago by people at that time involved in the World Revolutionary Party, which became the Communist Party. So we're just living a strategy. In fact, we've been living a business plan our whole lives, and so are your parents. We adapt so quickly to changes. Changes become the normal so quickly, and we have all these little cheap goodies from China. There's very few people. In fact, no one protested at the time. It's only since the early 90s that your main factories left shore to go to China. It was all done quietly, and people didn't even question what was happening.
You know, this is where I really appreciate your insight into this. And you have a wonderful website called cuttingthroughthematrix.com, and that gets us. I want to read something right off of the very top that you say it's a part of your course in deprogramming. It says, in all ages and all lands there have been those who seek truth. This seeking is an individual search for something more than self, and much more than the confines of this worldly system. It is the seeker who understands there is more than what meets the eye, who is not afraid and makes the choice to go into the unknown. The process of awakening has begun. The discovery is underway. This is part of a course in deprogramming. So obviously, you recognize this. What do you suggest people do to deprogram themselves?
Well, number one, in all ages, the majority of the public, just studying history, and this was known in ancient Greek times, in fact, the majority of the public will go with whoever rules them. They will go to the bitter end, obeying whoever rules them. If there is any revolution throughout history, they simply benefit as a side effect of the acts and the deeds of a few. So they go with the winner in all situations. They're almost along for the ride. They're passive participants in their own lives. They're not active participants in their lives. They question nothing. As long as they have enough free time to play and do the things they want to do, they don't mind being happy wage slaves under totalitarian types of rule, which is what we really have today. It's not even so covert anymore, because the government agencies have given themselves the rights through policy making, not through law making, but policy making, to come into anyone's home, snatch your child, or grab an elderly person and snatch them into the hospital or put them in a hospice. This is the normal now, and people accept it until it happens to them, which to the individual is unthinkable, of course. That's why they permit it to happen.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think Jefferson said that in the Declaration of Independence, that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed.
Yeah, and that's been the same in all ages. Change is always made by a few who can see through it and who actually stand up, and they will suffer always.
Well, we got some good stuff because we're the few, and we'll be back after the break with Alan, and we will continue to talk on this subject. Stay with us. All right, America, we're back with the Michael Herzog Show, American Awakening. Well, thank you, Alan, for waiting. And anyway, back to our discussion. Well, we know we have these people, and I like to talk about practical means of resistance, and I really like your website name, Cutting Through the Matrix, because I think the analogy is very apropos for what we're going through, especially since you've talked about how there is they've created this culture. We're all supposed to be happy little worker bees, and et cetera.
Well,
what do you suggest we do?
Yeah, we better be happy little worker bees.
Well, yeah. Well, it hasn't always been that way, and as you said, that they're positioned in such a way that they seem to be able to benefit from almost any calamity that occurs, whether it's man-made or natural. And there's some question as to how natural calamities actually are. But they seem to be positioned. What do you suggest we, as freedom-loving people, do, whether in Canada or in the U.S.?
Yeah, again, I would never expect the majority to side with anyone.
And that's what we're talking about. It's the minority that makes things happen.
It's the minority. And again, it's more than just saving something. How can you save something which really is so corrupt, so far removed from anything that was begun long ago?
So do you think it's too late in America, and keeping with the same concept, do you think it's too late in America to alter this form of government? Maybe we should abolish it and institute something new?
Whatever comes out would have to be a new system. Remember this, too. The elite have already, a long time ago, planned their new system, where they'll all be, again, happy little robots with no ability to think eventually if they get their way with science. The science is already proven and ready to go. They just have to convince us that it's all a natural progression. However, we can't go along with this part of the system and just stop time right here because it's so corrupt right now. There's nothing left to save. It's corrupt from the top right down. The whole system has fallen apart. It was rotten at its foundations, to be honest, because when money came in with the debt, perpetual debt and compound interest, that was it. That's part of the reason they had the revolution, was not to have the same system that ran Europe for hundreds of years running the Americas. They knew that compound interest and debt, and then its subsequent wars that it causes, to get money back into the coffers for all the debt would go on indefinitely. In fact, what the U.S. is doing now is just the culmination of the part of the plan, the final takeover of the last people who are holding out against the system in the Middle East. They're standardizing the world in the U.S. for definitely since Wilson, there's no doubt about that, in Mandel House. The U.S. have been the battering ram, the supplier of munitions and men to push the final leg for this world to take over.
Yeah, it seems like I've heard this said before, and I've often mentioned it to others when they've talked about that they want to fight against the New World Order, and I kind of chuckle and go, we are the New World Order. Don't you get it?
That's right, yeah. There's no doubt about it. Wilson was put forward as the front man to bring in the League of Nations and to fund it into existence. Mandel House was more important than Wilson because he was the main advisor. The advisors are always more important than the presidents. And because the advisors are in contact with the guys over in London. And Mandel House's contact was Sir Earl Grey in London. And Grey was part of this very top elite for pushing the British world system or the London world system across the whole world. And they thought by creating a League of Nations, which would transform into a global government, which so it is, it's become the United Nations, then they could do it that way. But they knew they'd need the United States for manpower, for raw resources, for manufacturing the war machine. And that's all the U.S. has been doing since.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mention Gray, in that I came across some material a while back dealing with the Order of the Gray Men. Have you heard of that?
Well, I first put out the Gray Men years ago. And the Gray Men are, and there's people making their livings off what I say. But the Gray Men are the men that go between the chessboard, between the black and the white squares. They're called the Gray Men. So there's always the visible politicians in this respect. It's the white squares; those are visible to the people. The dark ones are that's what's done in the darkness and secret. And then you have the grey men that go between the Kissinger types, that go between the real bosses, the presidents and prime ministers, with what they have to do with their agenda.
Well, it sounds like the Bilderbergers.
The Bilderbergers are only one part of it. It's a multi-faceted pyramid here, with each perfect section in contact with the stones above it. And the Bilderbergers are just one facet to deal with royalty. Coming presidents and prime ministers get invited there before the public hear their names spoken.
So they're just another front. They're just one of the many front organizations.
They're not just fronts. They're specialized parts. They're think tanks. They're specialized think tanks. The Club of Rome, for instance, one of its main objectives is world depopulation, and the Club of Rome plans out future crisis that they can control the people. They even say in their own book that they sat round a table and they said, for a substitute for war, when there's no one to fight, how do we keep government in power? And then it says we hit upon the idea that we are causing an environmental problem and therefore mankind is the enemy. Now that was from their own book published by the Club of Rome. It's the main think tank. They then market that to the lower think tanks, right down to the media, that propagandizes it into existence to the public.
Maybe we need to start our own freedom think tanks on ways of short-circuiting and circumventing.
It would take more than just see, what we need is a new way. Well, this way we're in today is anti-human.
All right.
It truly is. It's not cohesive with the people. It divides the people. And the Great Experiment, as the United States was called initially, was only to be a great experiment as long as people had their own little farm and they were completely independent. Now, with commerce and industry, they all knew that they'd go the same way as Europe if they were not careful, because with commerce and industry comes the debt, then comes armies, etc., that go along with it. So they knew that the U.S. could only be free if every little family could stay independent and in power over its government, not the other way around. And
so you're talking about a new way, and I know on your site. Oh, by the way, just a note to Thomas, our engineer. I'm experiencing a thunderstorm here, and I may get knocked off. So you're going to have to wing it if that happens, but let's hope it doesn't. Okay. Anyway, back to you, Alan. Your site deals with cutting through the matrix, and obviously we're in some kind of a manufactured reality, not necessarily the specifics of the movie, but that's analogous to what we're in.
Absolutely. So, in fact,
how do we do that? How do we fight through it? Give us some ideas. Give us three things we can do.
Those who can get through it. People, you just don't wake up and say, my goodness, my lifestyle is changing, I'm going to stop it. That's how most people actually think. And they don't get past that. It's only when the system is affecting their routine that they start objecting and complaining. They don't realize, wait a minute, my routine was given to me too. My 6 o'clock news was given to me. My favorite sports games at the weekend are given to me. That's their favorite routine. You've got to break beyond all of that, and you've got to sit down and say, now, what is the value of humanity? What's the value of living in the first place? What's the value in a peaceful society of neighbor to neighbor? What are the right values, and what are the things that destroy those values? Once you look at what destroys those values, you'll see it all around you as being implemented. Divide and conquer, one-upmanship, and the Jones keeping up with the Jones. There's nothing humane in this system. When we dispose of our elderly because they don't produce and consume anymore, they're just consumers. And when we allow people to come in, government agencies or even teachers, and literally lobotomize chemically the brains of young men who are your future leaders, they're the brighter ones amongst them, and they become troublesome at school because they ask questions, and then they're stuck on something like Ritalin, and their brains are fried. We're watching a horror show happen. We're allowing it to happen because, hey, it's not my child. And when we're so disconnected,
well, it sounds like you're talking about, Alan. It sounds like you're talking about something that Jesus talked about when he was asked, "Who is my neighbor?"
Yeah,
and he gave the illustration, of course, of the Good Samaritan who was looked down upon by the Pharisees of the day, and he reached out to anybody. So you're talking somewhat about reaching out and understanding that we're part. But people like to do things in groups, and individually, I understand this. I have a number of friends who, for the lack of a better term, have become survivalists, in that they've dropped off the grid, dropped out of the system, have gone through numerous name changes and location changes to become as anonymous to the system as possible. Not everybody can do that. What can Joe Sixpack and Jane Champagne do?
Joe Sixpack can stay as Joe Sixpack, to be honest, because it's not my job to get him off his booze. That's his problem.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying booze. I don't mean it.
But it's true. It is true. People are stuck in a routine which they enjoy.
Well, it's true. But what about the minority of us? Let's forget about the majority. Let's talk to the remnant here.
Well, they have to decide themselves what kind of world they would like to live in, as opposed to how it is right now. And it always brings you back. In any age, it's the same problems. What's your relationship for man to man? What is the purpose? Is the purpose just to be successful and have X amount of numbers, digits in the bank, on a piece of paper or a computer? Is that the function of life? Or to save up and say, I'm okay, I know there's disaster happening around me, so I don't care. Well, see, you've already got that system. You have a system that does not care. And so it's self-destructive at the bottom level. Now, the elite know this. It's not meant to last terribly long. They already know this, that it's crumbling through corruption, right down to the bottom, because as the king goes, so do the people, the old saying, you see.
Okay, so we recognize this.
And so you can't save that when it's already totally corrupt. It's like a cancer. You cannot avoid the cancer there. You got to get it out.
Well, then what choice do people have other than submitting to the existing system and whatever changes that the system lords go through?
It will take people to start saying no and enough. And it's not just that. The people who are mentally active in this and who understand what's happening don't just sit down and clap their hands when they hear of an occasional success. They must get involved, and just showing your face at certain places at the right time, like this occasion with the Browns, it makes a big, big difference, because the cockroaches don't like to see ordinary people standing up there witnessing what they're doing.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe as group, now I go back to the founding fathers of this nation, and that they created a situation in which people had to make a choice. We know roughly 1/3 of the people in the colonies were sided with the founding fathers. 1/3 were Tories, and a lot of them moved up by you. and up there in Canada, and roughly another third sat it out to see which way the wind blew.
Yeah.
As to which side they were going to be on. So we know that there's a minority of us, and it's a remnant. So being active and supporting resistance actively is what it sounds like is one step closer toward making this a nation or a country or a community that we want to live in.
Yes, a whole value change. Yeah.
Great. We'll be back after the break, folks, here on RBN. All right, good afternoon, America. Tim Wingate sitting in for the traveling Michael Herzog on the American Awakening. I have our guest today is Alan Watt. Alan Watt has a website, very simple, www.cuttingthroughthematrix.com. And he's got tools and information and seminars and downloads on just about everything about globalism and the New World Order and other esoteric information that you are probably interested in finding out. and we're talking with him about some specific things that can be done. And one of those is to join in with people who are resisting the system. Alan, we have a caller on the line. Would you like to take a call?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Jeff in Missouri, you're on.
Greetings. How you all doing today?
Doing well.
I appreciate your
question.
Yeah, I appreciate your show, sir. Resistance. I mean, do we go on the offensive and go try to take these people out, or just sit back and play defense?
Alan?
Well, it's no.
I guess that's the question.
You can't get offensive at the moment, I can tell you, because there's not a single group out there that isn't infiltrated. In fact, many of them were started up by the CIA years ago. And so you got, if you're going to be offensive, you've got to understand you'd have to start off, there's no doubt, trying to do it in a more passive nature of dialogue and putting terms and conditions out, because they have been ready for years. They've been arming for years for the troubles coming down about now, and they're all prepared for it. So you can't play with their own game. Yeah.
Hang on, guys. Okay. So it sounds like, part of the question I have is that, what people, would we, as Jeff says, take out?
Well,
what people?
Personally, fellas, I would start on a local level. At the Masonic Lodge seems to be where these guys are gravitating in and out of. But, there again, court system, who is really the enemy and where are they at? And, can you do it once you do one locally, if the other dominoes don't fall pronto, then someone's, you're in a lot of trouble,
Right, and they're expecting this kind of thing, and this is one of the concerns we had with the Browns, is that we don't want to have a showdown or a resistance, because that's what the excuse that they're going to use to clamp down.
Yeah, that's what the whole terrorism act is about. It's nothing to do with the Middle East. It's about the whole system here and in the West to be changed over the next 20
years. So we need to outsmart them, right, Alan? We need to outsmart them and engage them, as you said, in dialogue. And this is one of the reasons that I keep harping on this, if you will, and that is when you look at argumentation, the 5 premises of the Declaration of Independence is what basically made things start to move in this country. And I've said it, and I stand by it. If you don't agree with the 5 premises that are contained in the Declaration of Independence, then you are not an American patriot.
Yeah.
Well, Jefferson himself said that when you see a format or a system going through from one change of house, that meant from government to the next, then you are already under a form of tyranny. And that's here.
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jeff, for calling. Alan, thank you so much. Once again, folks, he's got books and tapes and all kinds of great things on cuttingthroughthematrix.net. This is Tim Wingate. We'll be back with you tomorrow on the Michael Herzog's show. And log on to freedomshenanigans.blogspot.com and see some of the things that you can do. Carpe Libertas. Seize liberty, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Hi, folks. I'm Alan Watt, and I'm standing in for John Stadmiller. Today, I'd like to continue, actually, from the last talk I've just been on this station, on this whole idea of the New World Order. And what I've found over many years is that the public who start to wake up individually, on an individual basis, generally only really are seeing one part that's affecting them personally. Something's prodding them, or something's needling them, or some agency is leaning on them, and they become terribly indignant. They still haven't got past that stage to realize it's not only happening to them, it's happening to lots of people all over their country and other parts of the world, because it's all one system now. And there's far, far more to it than just them being picked on in one area. The problem is we're completely socialized, and what we have is what the Club of Rome, the organization that project the future. They predict what they want to happen in the future, and they give it to the other think tanks to sort out the fine details. They then market that to the public via magazines, television, and radio, and even documentaries. They give us a predictive programming, they call it. We find this New World Order is not so new at all. In fact, I was thinking of calling my next book The Complete Dummy's Guide to the New World Order, because very few people really understand the big picture. What you have emerging as far back openly in history was society in England that came out into the open. I've no doubt it had existed for probably centuries, maybe even 1,000 years beforehand, and under different names and guises. A fraternity, which was called at the time the Rosicrucians, or the Rosicrucian Society. Not the fake one. They always have dummies, and they have a fake one which is based in California. They have a real one in Pennsylvania, and the big one in Switzerland. Now, the Queen Elizabeth I court, here the commercial's coming, so I'll be back after these messages. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, and I'm back standing in for John Stadmiller. I was talking about going back in time to try and trace this great agenda, this great work, as it's called, in higher circles. It openly emerged in the court of Queen Elizabeth I of England. You had Walter Raleigh, you had Francis Bacon around in those days, John Dee, who was an agent as a spy for Queen Elizabeth I. His number was 007. And the whole idea of bonded, of course, means you swear allegiance to your bonded. That's why you have James Bond with 007. We're always being made a mockery of through our ignorance. And the easiest way to control people is just to keep them in ignorance and eradicate the past. The Queen Elizabeth I court made its money and its fortunes by acquiring tremendous wealth by plunder. She authorized the plunder of the Spanish vessels that were in the high seas. They stole the gold and so on and accumulated great treasures of wealth. And those who did the dirty work were well rewarded and became knights and peers of the realm. They were all Rosicrucian. They believed in a higher intellect that they possessed, and they believed they were a different species in a sense from the rest of the public. The rest of the public were called commoners. The commoners married commonly. They did not plan their marriages or pick through genetic breeding the best partner, so they were called commoners. Therefore, they were treated almost like, well, actually, they weren't treated like animals, there's no doubt about it. And they were often called animals by the elite. It's an odd thing to realize that nothing has really changed. You have a psychopathic, inbred elite who pass on their genes with the psychopathy to their offspring, who are given special training in the art of controlling and governing the minds of the public. No different than the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. When they were young, they were instructed by the high priest around them on how the behavior of the ordinary person works, what the needs are of the ordinary person, their desires, their drives, and how easy it is to control them if you meet a minimum standard of those desires. Well, the Rosicrucians knew this too, and they planned a world empire in the 1500s. John Dee actually coined the term the British Empire and suggested it would be based on a form of takeover through free trade. And those who would come into the compact of free trade would have to eventually take on the same, what they would call a democratic form of government, and to get these special most favored nation trading status treaties given to them to keep so much of their taxes for themselves. This has been going on for over 500 years, the same agenda. When it became so well known what the Rosicrucians were about, they created a Freemasonic society. Change the name again. Now, Freemasons always show the pyramid because the pyramid has a capstone. The capstone is kept in secret from the public. It's always above the light, but it gives light to all the workers down below who work towards this system. That's why you have the eye of Lucifer between the capstone and the rest of the pyramid. The pyramid is always pictured as being in a wasteland. On the dollar bill, for instance, if you look at it, it's on a wasteland with shrubs, pretty well dead, little broken twigs, etc. That's the populace. That's the people. The dead, the world of the dead. This hasn't changed for hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of years. An ancient society runs the world based on selective breeding, with picking their mates for certain qualities like Plato talks about in his book, The Republic, a book everyone should read because it talks about breeding people at the end in this utopia, breeding people to be specific types of workers, specially made people, and that rings almost along the lines of cloning. I don't think Plato had that in mind at the time, but he knew, like animals, you could breed traits in or out of domesticated animals. If you want an aggressive attack dog, you breed aggressive dogs, male and female. And there's a good chance you'll have your aggressive attack dog. If you want a good pet that will get along with children, you simply breed out aggressiveness and you keep mating them till they have a passive Labrador. It's the same with people. Now, psychopathy or the psychopathic personality is an interesting subject because really that is a system that gave us our culture. Our culture today is not a humane culture. It's a competitive system where those with the most psychopathic traits are liable to succeed at the expense of others. A trait of the psychopath is they have no conscience. Those who get up into the higher levels of anything in this system do it over the bodies or the lives or the broken families of others, and that is called success. Then the people tend to cheer them on. It's rather amazing to see the public groveling and bowing and scraping to people like Oprah, who are presented to them as having all the answers to please them. This goes back once again to ancient times, because there is nothing new under the sun. The people will always give power to the beast, and the beast system was always the epitome of the basest things in human nature. Those who get to the top through any means possible are the beast, basically. We have no chance of altering anything unless people recognize this and start bringing back some form of values into their life, values which would have to be extended to other peoples and all peoples. The problem is today, the last people to realize that their system and their country is pretty well gone, because it was never theirs in the first place, is the United States. They were chosen to, maybe not initially, it's hard to say, it's very difficult. There was a lot of Freemasons in there who talked about a global government. They called it a federation of nations, to be run by 12 wise men, according to Benjamin Franklin in his letters and diaries. They envisaged a certain system on their particular viewpoint, and today we already have this same system, only it's definitely deviant. Whether it was meant to be in the first place, we don't know, but it certainly has been pushing towards a deviant system, with a deviant culture at the very end of it. 50 years ago, the big think tanks got busy because they knew towards the end of the system and this way of life, which would have to come to an end, they knew themselves that their own corruption would spread down to the lowest orders of the public. And it has. People are now terribly base as opposed to how they used to be. They've been made so through entertainment primarily. And they copy what they see, as the ancients always knew. We have, so they planned a system where they'd start to eradicate the public. They knew they wouldn't need so many people to exist and live in a scientific era. this era is here. It's been here for a long time, in fact. And it's no coincidence that when the big boys like Charles Galton Darwin could write about the depopulation program necessary to save not the planet, but at that time he said to save the elite from being overrun by commoners in the 1950s in his book, The Next Million Years. It's no coincidence that the things that he suggested that they do to the public, including sterilization of them through inoculations and tampering with food and water supplies to make them infertile, it's no coincidence that we see that has happened. The fastest growing business in the U.S. today is actually the infertility clinics. The United Nations has published openly for the last few years that the sperm count in the average Western male is down by 75% of what it was before 1950. So in a short time, most men now are 3/4 sterile. This is no coincidence. As I say, it was published a long time ago. We're seeing the effects all around us. The very fact they can announce the statistics every year without saying, my goodness, this is a crisis, as it obviously should be, means that it's meant to happen. We're just living an agenda. The Masonic societies, even at the bottom levels, are the agencies which are sworn to uphold this particular system, no matter how bad it is. It's odd that the same Masonic societies in centuries gone by were the very vehicles by which they pushed for revolution. Once the revolutions were over and a particular group were in, they allow all kinds of atrocities to occur. Because they're told to at the top. Remember, it's a pyramid system where you take orders from the top and you must obey them without question. We can go back to the 1500s and carry on from there. In the 1700s, they gave a Masonic society for the middle classes, which they knew they'd have to create in order to control the system of an industrial revolution, to keep the rest of the public in their place and to keep the same system going. And now here comes another break, so I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, standing in for John Stadtmiller, who's out at New Hampshire, where the Browns are, because of the television program, I think, in progress at the moment to inquire as to what's actually happening. And we don't know how much will be the truth or how much will be omitted, but hopefully something will get out to the general public. And if nothing else, let's hope no one gets killed or slaughtered as a message to the public to behave themselves. That's one thing we do have at the moment, is the ability, limited though it may be in some ways compared to the big media, we can actually have the ability to communicate what's happening as it happens. Although, as I say, I'm sure there are many other cases happening all over the country at the same time. In fact, when you think about their beautiful, humane system, there are people losing their homes every day. Just look at the housing statistics and the bankruptcies. And remember, it isn't just houses that are left empty. It means that there's families out somewhere living maybe on the streets for all we know. And children are snatched off into children's aid societies. That's called our modern civilization that people are trying to keep. I keep saying it's so corrupt you can't keep it. It's so far gone. Getting back to the topic of conversation today is trying to fill in people on some of the histories of this New World Order, which goes way back in time to a plan that was at least publicly declared in London in the 1500s through an idea of free trade negotiations leading to amalgamation of countries which would adopt the same London system of government, and it would be done worldwide. This eventually blossomed into the British Commonwealth. Before that, it was called the Empire. Every part of the empire, including Canada, where I am now, was called the Dominion. It was a dominion of Canada. under the dominion of London. Now it's called the Commonwealth since World War II. They give a more fuzzy, nice sound to it. The Commonwealth of Nations. But this Commonwealth of Nations was supposed to blossom into a United Nations under a world government, again with frontmen leading the world government, backed by a multi-leveled bureaucracy which would govern the affairs of the planet in a more scientifically efficient way. It's interesting to note that even though they always talk about science being their new type of God, at least their method of controlling nature, as they called it in days gone by the breaking down understanding of nature, which was science, they could control the world and everything in it and perfect all that which was left imperfect, as the Masons say. And they have been doing it when you think about it. They've been altering all your crops for years, long before you were told about it. They've been altering people genetically through inoculations. Most people today have very poor immune systems, which again was part of the targets that Galton Darwin and others talked about. You don't want a fit, healthy society, especially when you don't want a mentally active society being in existence when you're bringing about the biggest changes in history for thousands of years. And this New World Order is to bring around the biggest changes in history you've ever witnessed. It's to be a brand new way of living, and eventually there'll be no breeding at all by choosing a partner. You'll be lucky to even have a clone made of you unless you serve the system very well down the road. This has been talked about openly at meetings, world meetings. They have discussed the fact that the base material, meaning the general public, those who haven't climbed the ladder of success, all the junk genes, as they would call it, are left behind. They can't evolve any further on their own, so therefore the general public have to gradually be disposed of in a world where you don't need so many hard laborers anymore, especially in a post-industrial society. Where do all those people fit in? Well, guess what? They don't fit in. They're not meant to work in classrooms. They're not meant to work as professors. That's what people did in factories before for a couple of hundred years. Where were they supposed to go? Nothing was made for them. They were the eggshells that Mr. Rockefeller talked about at his Global Citizenship Award meeting. He says you can't make an omelette, which is the New World Order, in an international society. You cannot make an omelette without breaking the eggs. And so for a generation or two or three or more, you'll have incredible chaos in society as people try to readjust into this new system. That's the world we're living in. It's been told to us by 1,000 different directions from areas, and we better understand what we're really up against before we can take it on. Back in a few minutes. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, standing in for John Stadtmiller, and I've just been told that Michael Herzog is back to give us an update about what's happened out at New Hampshire, the Browns. Hello?
Hello, Alan, how you doing?
Not so bad, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. You having a good show?
Yes,
Okay. Well, listen, yes, I do have an update. I had an update on my show, but there seems to be some further events transpiring, and I wanted to give the listeners on John's show a quick overview here. First of all, the press conference went off well. It went on at 2 o'clock, and John and I went down and had a conference with the county sheriff, in which basically we had a chat with him about whether he would be opposed to us having the county attorney look into this as far as convening a grand jury to investigate the actions of the court. And the sheriff said that he would have no opposition to that. Now, that's fine. That's well and good. And again, the conference went off well. Now, the latest event is that I had called my son to download. He had called me and told me that he had watched the entire conference on one of the station's websites, one of them which would be www.wmur.com, and that's out of, I believe it's out of Boston. And I asked my son to download it and email it to us. He went back on to download it, and it was gone. Now, what he found was, and this is what's interesting, he found another press conference that they did with the U.S. Marshals just after our press conference. Mm-hmm. And the questions, some of the questions that the reporters had, two in particular, is what were they doing about the supporters of Elaine and Ed Brown? And the marshal answered that they are being followed, number one. And next question was, do you plan on arresting any of them? And the marshal said yes. Now, we have not yet seen that video, but I would request that all of the listeners go in to www.wmur.com, download it for themselves, and take a look. That's what I have for you at this moment. Okay, so we'll keep you posted. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it, okay?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, too, how many protesters are there?
Well, it's not protesters. I mean, you know, they're talking about supporters. And when they held the press conference, you know, Ed Brown got up and spoke for about 10 minutes. Then he turned it over to his wife, Elaine. Of course, there was a question and answer with Ed. He turned it over to Elaine. She spoke for about 10 minutes, and there was a question and answer with her. Then they turned it over to John Statmiller. There was about 10 minutes with John, a question and answer, and then it went to me. There was another 10 minutes with questions and answers, and then it went to Randy Weaver and question and answers, and then the press conference ended. So, and what I understand, and I just got the report from my son, that after the conference had ended, the press did a press conference with the U.S. Marshal's Office asking questions about what was said at the first press conference.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
did the marshal mention anything to you about arresting supporters?
No, the only report I've got is a report from my son. We are on the road right now. We don't have access to a computer, so my son is kind of my eyes for me right now. Mm-hmm. And you know, he's giving me reports, and I'm relaying them on. And I'm also asking the listeners, you know, to go in and take a look for themselves, because right now John and I are blind. We don't have access.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. All right, very good. And that's the update for the moment, okay?
Okie doke.
All right, thank you, Alan. I appreciate it. All right, bye-bye.
Bye now. Yeah, well, there you have the latest there, but this is not unusual for the public to be told one thing while you're there, and then you get a different version filmed and shown to the public, to the rest of the public afterwards. The news has been very good at this over many, many years of censoring by omission of certain clips. You can change the whole perspective just by omission in one or two clips, in fact, of any particular situation. However, I do know, because I have friends in the U.S. who travel a lot, one woman who visits her relatives in Texas every year was detained at the airport in Pennsylvania for 5 hours before she was told that she was down as a financial terrorist. And a financial terrorist is a term they're using now for anyone who withholds taxes of any kinds which the federal government claims is due to them. I've no doubt that will expand to include the states, any state as well, taxes, and probably eventually your parking tickets even. We are under, the whole Western world is under the same anti-terrorist rules. It was planned years before 9/11. That's why every country, including little Finland and Sweden, signed the exact same laws into their country at the same time as the United States did. This was planned this way, and as Carroll Quigley said, the professor, Carroll Quigley, who was a mentor to Clinton, according to Clinton himself, Bill Clinton, he said that wars are meant to change societies. He said you can change society more on a social level within 5 years of war than you can with 50 years of peace and propaganda. So society has already changed, and it won't matter, as we well know through experience, who is voted in next, because the agenda continues, and it will continue as long as we're all obeying the United Nations. we don't realize that since every country signed the United Nations in 44, 45, starting with the Atlantic Charter, which was a blueprint for the United Nations, no country signing that became sovereign anymore. That was made official, even though it's not taught in the schools anymore. It used to be taught at one time. And therefore, you're already under international maritime law. That's what we're all under. Again, a maritime law going back to Queen Elizabeth I's reign, when the pirates ruled the seas on behalf of the Queen. That's why they had the skull and bones, because we're all Freemasonic Rosicrucians who partook in stealing the wealth of others. You'll find the same thing in the book by Albert Pike, where he talks about the need to use all means to acquire vast amounts of wealth, including the stock market, any means possible, and then becoming the masters over the masters of the world, as Albert Pike put it. He then financed Giuseppe Mazzini to start the revolutions over in Italy. Giuseppe Mazzini just means Joseph Mason in Italian. So they love these little tricks that they play on us. But yeah, they've been funding revolutions down through history. The people who go into the revolutions always expect one outcome, and lo and behold, you find you just furthered the plan of the nefarious bunch you were opposing in the first place. It's very clever. They also planned a revolution in France, again, tailor-made for the French. This was a nation already of basically one type of people. And they did another one for the Soviet Union. Giuseppe Mazzini started up the international party, the Internationalists. That became the Communist Party. And the guy who took over from Giuseppe Mazzini on behalf of the Royals, the Scottish branch of Freemasonry, was Lenin. And they called it the Communist Party. This was all planned from London and financed from London. A great trick. Buy and create your own opposition with the intent of bringing new power structures into being for the future in which you're already in charge. To take over vast areas like what became the Soviet Union, many countries were amalgamated into it and standardized under the one system. Once that's done, you just bring them back into the fold. You don't have to fight a war with each individual country. They're already standardized. And that was a very, very clever plan, which succeeded tremendously well. And that's why the wall eventually in Berlin went down. Nothing to do with it falling from within. It was the orders. And Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the president of the Soviet Union at the time, gave a speech which you can still find, and I believe is still in the archives of the Toronto Sun. He gave his farewell speech to the Politburo, and it was published in the papers here. He said, you'll hear that shortly communism will be dead. Don't believe it. He said we're simply moving on to the next phase of global socialism, which was always the plan in the first place. Then you jump from there, you jump back to the Club of Rome, which is affiliated with all the other big clubs, including the Bilderbergers. And the Club of Rome said that it searched the world for different forms of government. They found the best ways to control the public, and they found that collectivism or socialism or communism was the best means for a few to rule over. That's what's coming into play today. And they've been working hard on this for many, many, many years, including all the reactions they expect to get from various people within society in the Western world as they pull off this final phase of it. The agenda was to kick off in 2001 on the last leg. Arthur C. Clarke, a very high Freemason, wrote The Allegory in 2001, a movie back in the 1960s. It was to be complete by 2010. That was the title of his second book and the second movie. And, of course, we already know that by 2010, the U.S. and Canada and some parts of Latin America are to be totally not only integrated but up and running as an integrated new continent, a government, a counterpart of the European Union, in fact, a clone. And in the free trade negotiations which happened in the 80s and into the 90s, which was a precursor of NAFTA, they actually discussed where to put the new capital they decided they would put it in Montreal, for those who don't know yet, not to upset people by thinking it was run by America. So this kind of stuff has been published in little paragraphs in newspapers, not the main stories, and never will be the main story until you're under that kind of government and they see their victory in sight. That's when the real boys that run the world will come forward, so-called hidden masters, as they call themselves, when there's no opposition against them, and not before. However, they still have to officially declare we're integrated. They have integrated the border systems in Canada and the US. There's been the newspapers here. Right after 2001, November the 11th, they also published that the FBI had opened offices up in Canada. They also mentioned that the CSIS, which is the Canadian Intelligence Service, is now blended totally with the CIA, and no doubt the branches in Latin America too. And that certain high-level bureaucrats from Ottawa can apply for jobs in similar positions in Washington, D.C., and vice versa. Well, if that doesn't mean total integration, I don't know what does. It's already happened. It's been happening for a few years now. This, as I say, is really the complete idiot's guide to the New World Order. The information is out there, but the average person in the public are too busy chasing rainbows or shadows or shadow people to notice the big things that are really happening, which eventually will affect them. What's happening to the Browns will happen to many, many more people in the near future as money gets scarce, as we all know, as the inflation is rampant now. The dollar is becoming like the lira or the peso. And gasoline, as predicted, would go out of sight, and diesel too. All foods, all stuff is transported to the stores by diesel, and the guy at the bottom pays the cost of it all. We're now being brought down to a level of a good part of the world, while at the same time the U.S. pays and funds the last leg of the takeover in the Middle East to standardize that country too, or those countries as well, into this global agenda. Once that's over, we'll all be a nice global plantation, living in happy habitat areas that the United Nations are not going to call the big cities, making beads, I guess, for Chinese tourists maybe, if we're lucky. And someone else will make the string to put them on. That's their plan, is to start taking down the populations of the world in the very near future. Those who run this world do not believe in non-productive people serving them. They run on efficiency. Their world is one of economics, not humanity, not humanitarian feelings, not emotions, not love, or anything else. They're almost insect-like in the way they view the general public. As I say, we are a separate species to them. That's how they view us. We've allowed them to inoculate everyone heavily since 1950s on. We've watched the death rates go up, and what used to be called aging diseases come down into younger age groups until now you even have juvenile arthritis. We have autism in about 1 in 5 families throughout the country. Not only autism, with attention deficit and different degrees of the same thing of autism. That's all it is different degrees of the same problem after they get in their mumps, rubella, etc., their vaccines early on. True autism prior to the 50s was fairly rare. It was rare, and it was generally noticeable from birth. The new autism for the New World Order starts 2 weeks after they get their inoculations at the age of 2. This is known at the top. It is perfectly well known. The reason there's no outcry is because it's meant to happen. As I say, you don't want a bright, intelligent, well-educated population existing while you take people through the greatest changes that have happened for thousands of years. And the changes they're talking about, as I say, are so alien to even the present system, which is corrupt enough. The next society will be there to serve societies, to serve the state, the world state. There'll be no personal choice in anything. Ultimately, there'll be brain chips and monitoring, and you won't be able to even think as a distinct, separate individual. This was stated at the Loyola University meeting in Louisiana about 5 years ago now. There's a world science meeting where they brought in all the top specialists with various kinds of microchipping, surgeons and medical professionals, and they said they have a chip ready to go, which will, once embedded, will integrate with your nervous system, can receive and transmit messages, and then it will be impossible to even think of yourself as a separate individual. What a future, eh? I'll be back in a few moments. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, standing in for John Stadtmiller, who's out at the Browns' home in New Hampshire. So this debate goes on as to what's to happen with the Brown family. They're under attack by the feds. At least at the moment, it's more of a threat. It's not physical. As to if they're going to pay up their supposed taxes or not. As I say, these federal taxes in the United States are more of a policy than an actual law. And you'll find these policies are being made now by everyone in society as we're being turned into police states, where even the citizenry and stores are all part of this new Gestapo that we're seeing springing up. We're seeing a world come into existence planned this way. The planning went on years ago to bring it into being. They knew the formats from previous times. What worked in the Soviet system is now implemented in the US, Canada, and within the European countries. I went into a store at the weekend in Sudbury, Ontario, and I asked for a packet of cigarettes, because I like cigarettes. If you smoke cigarettes and the trails don't bother you so much, the spraying that they do in the sky, and you still keep a clear head and you don't have any memory loss. And this young girl, about 18 or 19, she says, we have to have ID. And I said, well, do I look like a teenager to you? She said, oh no, it's our policy now. Of any age group, doesn't matter. But they want an ID photograph of your driving license. And I said, well, what's this for? Is it to collect the data, the names of people who are still smokers or what? And she gave me that, the zombie dead look. And I've no doubt, I was on camera anyway. All the stores have cameras. And they have your voice print on that thing too. It also takes your voice. And here they are wanting your driving license as well, just to make it easier for them to ID you as a smoker. Maybe they'll send the SWAT teams down to you eventually. The anti-smoking SWAT team will be barging into your home when you light up. Or maybe we'll have to go down to the street corner where they used to sell dope and, ask the guy who's looking rather suspicious if he's got any golden Virginia there and pay big bucks for it. Because that's what it's coming down to in this totalitarian system, where they inject all kinds of poisons into you with the intent of destroying your immune system and with the intent of dropping the points of the IQ level quite sharply. And yet here they are telling you they care about your health as they spray you every day from the skies, just like bugs. So when there's no real logic to what they're doing, there's a real purpose somewhere. And the purpose is that smoking seems to counteract the effects of these particular spray drugs that are coming down on people. And some of us have done our own informal surveys and found this to be true. It's also interesting that even the Indians up here in Canada, who are way ahead of the white populations, because they've had enough of the white man and his promises and treaties, they use tobacco in their ceremonies quite often, and they're still very mentally awake as well. Interesting little phenomena to observe. But we're well on our way to this whole totalitarian system, where shortly you'll need ID to buy a tin of beans if you're still silly enough to do so. That's the kind of world that's being brought in. Is that the kind of world that we're going to accept? Do you want your own child asking you for ID when you walk in like a total stranger? Because that's also the world that's coming. Everyone's been divided and conquered. It's up to the older age groups to do something, the ones who have the history in their mind and in their brain, and who have the knowledge and wisdom to alter the course of this for the better, not for anyone else. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, standing in for John Stadtmiller, who's up in New Hampshire with the Browns, and he'll be reporting more on this tomorrow, I'm sure. I've been filling in, talking about how old this particular system is. This system that was designed over 500 years ago, at least in the open, that came out then, talking about a world to come, at least part of this planning, part of this stage of a world to come, followed by this mystical almost future that they envisaged in the 1500s of a transformation into a new type of order, an order which really will be based on feudalism. Now, Professor Carroll Quigley, in his book Tragedy and Hope, mentions, now he was the historian for the Council on Foreign Relations, which is the American branch of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the big movers and shakers towards this global government system. And Quigley said that he gave the real history, he filled in all the blanks between the various wars down through the centuries to show not only a pattern with a definite direction in mind and an end goal, but all the whys, the men who played their hands in it, who financed it, and who were the winners, who benefited from them all, and what their final goal would be. He said eventually the world is to be ruled on a public-private type partnership basis. This is written in the 1960s, remember, Tragedy and Hope. And he said the new system will be a feudal system where the new overlords, the new barons of the system will be the CEOs of international corporations. People have been trained to believe that the big international corporations are independent from each other, and nothing is further from the truth. At the top, there is no competition, there's cooperation. We find, if you go back into the literature written during the Cold War from governments, they said that science would win the Cold War. And so they put so much of your tax money, and they love wars for that purpose, into research and development to find bigger, better weapons and satellites in space that would eventually control us on Earth. This has happened. So therefore, science would win. You cannot share scientific secrets with independent corporations. You just simply dish out to them all the same technology at the same time. Back in a minute. Hi, folks. I'm Alan Watt, standing in for John Stadtmiller. I've been talking about the sciences and how through war, research and development can jump ahead in leaps and bounds because they have unlimited financing from taxation. It's a time when people don't mind being taxed. The oldest trick in the book is that we need all this money to defend you. That's why they always need enemies. And in a time of a global government, they know that when you run out of enemies, you must create enemies within your neighbor, yourself, or whomever. They'll do just fine. So therefore, the research and development and the sciences you'll find have been led by the military-industrial complexes of the big countries of Europe and the United States. Combined together, you cannot keep secrets in a modern society. It's impossible. That goes too for little terrorist groups in the planet. All this stuff with Ben Laden hiding out in a cave is utter nonsense. The intent of this whole war was to change society, to change the world into the next phase of the New World Order as an ongoing process. So the sciences are not in competition. The companies are not in competition at the top. You'll notice when even the XP, the computer, was phased out, it went out overnight in most places. When the new Vista came in and all the major brands were there equipped with it, they're all working in cooperation. The Vera chip implant that they want everyone to take, and they're already giving it to youngsters in different countries to get into nightclubs. It's great how sex not only sells, they use the drives of the young to get them into the very hot nightclubs, and they don't mind getting a chip that can be programmed with so much money and is deducted when you swipe your arm at the bar. That's how easy it is to induce young people into giving up more and more freedoms and rights. The Vera chip company, you will find if you dig in far enough, is a legitimate company like most of the big ones are, but they're also just fronts for the CIA and the NSA. To maintain power, you would not allow independent companies to go off in their own directions. Therefore, you make sure that you fund into existence the biggest companies and corporations, and therefore they're under the umbrella control of a central head, a central authority, and that's what science is all about. That's what the big scientific companies and all the electronic companies are all about. Last week, I gave a talk on one of my Cutting Through the Matrix sites, and on this very topic, you find that the companies like Hitachi and Sony and all the biggies, the ones that you think are there to give you entertainment machines, are all cooperating down the line of implants and brain chips. What a coincidence. It's only a coincidence to those who haven't been following their history while they actually lived through it. And that goes for most people. You know, in a time of change, you don't allow the public to breathe easy. In fact, if you go through every generation for over 100 years, you'll find that no one's been born to live in peace. They've never had a peaceful life. If it's not an overt physical war, it's a cold war. If it's not a cold war, it's a depression or an economic crisis. It's one thing after another, because we're supposed to be the sheep, you see. We're given these good shepherds down through history. Well, sheep have one purpose, and that's to be fleeced by the owners of the sheep, the shepherd, and you'll be fed as mutton to them as well. That's your purpose as far as the elite see you. That's why you call yourself sheep in churches. And a sheep is the stupidest animal you could ever meet. So I'd advise everyone to stop calling themselves sheep following the shepherd. Pick a better animal with some guts. This is a system in which we live. We've been conditioned through words. We even call ourselves sheep in churches to dehumanize us to that extent through psycholinguistics. We call our children kids. Another term promoted to us. Children has gone out of vogue for some reason. But again, it's a dehumanized term. It's an animal, a young animal. It's not human. And what was it they said years ago by Lenin? They would use new words to confuse the public and split the generations and split the families. Well, guess what? It's been done. It's the same thing with calling someone babe. An adult is not a baby, yet it was promoted through music and movies and so on. These are called psycholinguistics. You can actually go into neurolinguistics, because eventually it changes your whole perception of things subconsciously as you dehumanize each other by using non-human terms on each other. That's the scientific world in which we live today. It didn't just evolve that way. It was planned that way by specialists, by scientists who are employed by those who run the world through money and power and old estates, and through families that have acquired the wealth down through millennia, initially by force and then by law. And it's called taxation. Taxation is nothing more than taking your labor in the form of money. And in the feudal system, it used to be 60% of your produce was taken by the feudal overlord if you were a tenant farmer. Today, 60% of your income is taken by government. So nothing has really changed, except this more clever Charles Galton Darwin himself, a grandson of Charles Darwin. And the Galton Darwin was a physicist working for Britain. He said we are now in the process of creating a more sophisticated form of slavery. The best form of slavery is one where the public don't know that they are actually slaves. Today, people are trying to fight to hold on to something which was never theirs. It is a form of slavery. It's an inhumane system where we're separate from other people. If we don't care what happens to other people, not only in our own countries, but to those outside our own countries, as we go over and bomb the hell out of them and blast wedding parties off the map by mistake and all this kind of stuff, if we don't care about that, then eventually the wolf will come run to you using the same techniques, and there'll be no one to cry for you. So we better start regaining some humanity back, at least those who are able to do so. For a lot of people, they're too far gone. A lot of people who live in the television box and inside computers can no longer tell the difference between fantasy and fiction. That was another process talked about by people like Lord Bertrand Russell, who helped plan a lot of this agenda for the globalists. He was part of them. He came from a long lineage of top aristocracy in London. You should read his book. It's called The Impact of Science on Society. He said shortly the public will be under the influence of a form of mind control, which they'll be totally unaware of. This was also stated by Brzezinski in his book, The Technotronic Era. The book was called Between Two Ages, the chapter, The Technotronic Era. He said the same thing. A form of science would be used on the public shortly, of which they would be oblivious. It would control their minds or thoughts. He said that eventually they would have no opinions of their own. All they would be able to do is repeat and parrot what they'd heard on the previous night's news, because they would then expect the media to actually exist, to do everything for them. 50 years ago or less even, the public are more savvy when it came to governments. They knew through word of mouth, because people used to communicate much more often then, that the big barons of media always worked for the ultra-rich, and so you didn't believe anything that they spun towards you. Not today. The public don't question the media. They don't question the famous faces that they've grown up with. And that's why those famous faces get paid so much money, is to stay there their whole lives, so that those generations grow up seeing them, thinking, this is Big Brother here, he'd never lie to me. Meanwhile, in the Gulf War II, or Gulf War Part II, we should call it, we find all these famous faces suddenly are called embedded reporters with the military, meaning they're sworn to go along with the military, and of course the propaganda spin that would go along with it. So really it was called in-bedded, not embedded reporters. They were in bed. Then, of course, it's declassified that the main characters you've grown up with, like Dan Rather, Arthur Schlesinger and others, worked for the CIA. Well, what a surprise, eh? What a surprise. And it's no different in Britain or anywhere else. That's how we're controlled. The next step, of course, is the technotronic equipment, which is widely exposed by Nick Begich and others. They've had this technology for a long time. They send thoughts directly to not only an individual's brain, but to a whole nation's, if need be. Back in a few seconds after these messages. Hi, folks. I'm Alan Watt, standing in for John Stadtmiller, who I'm sure will be back with a lot of information tomorrow on what's happening to the Browns in New Hampshire. I've been talking today about the guide to the New World Order, and I use that term today, because most people really don't understand it at all. They only think that their system is just now being changed, but in fact, it's been changed many times down through the last 150-odd years, at least, with different depressions. They had 3 depressions prior to the Great Depression, 3 of them in the late 1800s, when 3 of the major bankers, Morgans, etc., got together and crashed the economy and looted the pension funds, etc., of ordinary people. This was standard practice in the 1800s. This tends to get forgotten about because of all the other wars that were going on at the time. They love depressions, and they have them every so often. That's why they've never really changed the system, so they can always bring another one on again when need be. We know that money is just a con game. It's a trick to induce people to go for an idea being a value and a price. A price is only someone's idea of something. We're all trained to believe it's something concrete like government, where government itself is just an idea. It only becomes concretized when we truly forget that it's an abstraction. It is abstract in its concept. And we allow it to bully us and dictate over us. Then we have a force against us. Jefferson and others warned the people long ago, because they had the same tyranny then. They'd watched the European countries. They knew how a small band of elite wealthy people could get together, take over countries through debt creation, run the finances, and then collect the debt through basically confiscating all the property of the countries and creating standing armies, sending them off to fight with other countries and grabbing the loot of those countries. Don't forget today that the United States, which is today's strong-arm man for the New World Order, has looted parts of the Middle East big time. On the CBC television in Canada, prior to the Iraq invasion, we saw a program, a documentary special. Now, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is our form of the BBC. It's sponsored and paid for by our tax money through the government. So we did a documentary special on all of the ancient artifacts that were in the museum in Baghdad. And there was a guy in New York and a guy in Texas who were taking bids before the army went in, remember, to Iraq, taking bids on all those artifacts for multi-billionaires who wanted them in their private collections. And if you remember, the troops were held outside that museum. When they did go in, it was looted already, which meant there was CIA cooperation in there. And sure enough, all those people who put the bids in got their little private artifacts. That's the reality of looting and plunder and war. It's nothing to do with what you're told. The other side effect, as I said, is that your whole society now back home in every Western country is now a police state. You just haven't seen the laws enforced right down the line yet. They're all on the books. They're all approved. The agencies are ready with their agendas, and the public are being kept in the dark. The police and the military are being trained to be ultra-paranoid of the general public now. But getting back to looting, it was discussed here in Canada again, that the Air Force had bombed all the old, obsolete oil refineries in Iraq, and of course the American taxpayer would have to fund the rebuilding of new, up-to-date ones, which of course then would be given over for peanuts to certain corporations once they were built and up and running. That's what war is about. That's why the skull and the bones of Yale University exists. That's the pirate flag, you see. There's plunder. They see no problem with plunder and looting. under friendly faces and indignant faces. Indignant because those monsters over there obviously are behind all the world's problems, according to them. They dehumanize an enemy before to get the public riled up against them. And unfortunately, this technique has worked down through the ages, time after time, with the dark, unthinking masses ready to put on uniforms and go off and fight. They don't benefit themselves, and they don't seem to mind that the bosses above them do benefit. I'll be back in a few minutes. Hi, folks. I'm Alan Watt, and I'm back again, filling in for John Stadmiller today. I've been talking the last couple of hours, really, from the previous show on to this one, about the agenda and how old this agenda is. It's an agenda they decided long ago, those participants at the top, long before Darwin came on the scene. They decided that there were two types of people in the world, three really, themselves, the elite, who'd shown by their hereditary ability to gain more and more wealth and to hold on to it down through the generations. This is where the whole idea about good breeding came in. They really believed in that. They had their wives chosen for them from similar families. And what you saw was the interbreeding of the psychopathic types at the top. Not stupid psychopaths, clever psychopaths. Ones who would not lose their tempers in public, but could use arts of persuasion to get the public to do whatever they wished. Because one of the great skills of a psychopath is to manipulate others into doing your work for you. So they studied people, they funded the psychology sciences into existence. All top data concerning the study of great populations went to them first, because then they can see how to proceed at every particular level. The conclusions about the average person are really very simple. The male will go through milestones, the female goes through her milestones. The male, by nature, will want to get a wife. He's driven with a sexual impulse, which is to procreate. He doesn't think about the children at the time. That's nature again, because it doesn't care what you think or what you go through. It only wants to make sure of the survival of the species, in all species, in every species. But they also knew that the family, down through the ages, was the last vestige of a tribal system. It was a tribal system which used to stand up against conquerors or invaders. The family still, especially the extended family, and they had those 20, 30, 40 years ago, they'd stand up together as one when one of their members was in trouble with the big authority. They had to smash that, and they wrote about it, that they would destroy the family unit. They'd do it through attacking the psychology of the female. Therefore, they funded the women's liberation into existence. They went full steam ahead to get a contraceptive pill. They funded that to the hilt, just as much as today they fund the genetic research to the hilt, because that was a priority, must be. And sure enough, once they got the women into the workforce, mainly in World War II, which again is another function of war, is to alter society, you find that there's no real family anymore. Most people, even here in Canada, are socialized to expect government agencies to take care of all their major problems. A few years ago, there was a child care strike, basically, which is funded partly, and I don't know if it's all funded now by government. At that time, it was partly funded by government, and they were talking to women in the street who demanded that the government do something because it was their job to look after their children. That's what's changed. That's what's changed. They actually expected government to take care of their children as a natural right. And that's the new normal now. We have agencies taking care of all these major problems, while we, the adults, are supposed to go out to work and then play, just play forever like eternal children, while our betters do all the hard work at the top. We don't have to worry our pretty little heads about anything. It's all been taken care of by the experts. Bertrand Russell again said that they would create a society that would be unable to do anything without the opinion of an expert. And so you get experts pulled out of the hat every day on the media, and we automatically, like Pavlov's dogs, go into a coma and get downloaded whenever an expert appears in front of us. We don't have to think anymore, we just get downloaded. He must be telling the truth. After all, he's the expert. And through the propaganda of experts, we can be made to believe anything at all, including global warming. It's surprising how few people really see the spraying in the skies that's altering the weather. The heavy spraying of the polymers and the aluminum content within it, barium too. There's different metallic substances there. This was all talked about in the 1950s, that they would do this it was Teller, who was the inventor of the atom bomb. He said if we sprayed the skies with these metallic particles in a carrier-type solution, we can create a great circuit across the world, and then we could use standing wave-type technology to send signals across the world, alter the weather, and also they talked about altering the moods, perception, and the minds of the general public. They said it would be a fantastic weapon. Well, guess what? It's been used pretty well continuously now since 1998 all over most of the world. It was formalized in the Open Skies Treaty. Now, there's two treaties to do with that. One is commercial aircraft, the other one is military. Look at the one with the military, and you'll see this strange wording because it don't go into any detail as to why these military jets will be flying over specific areas every day, followed by observation jets. Well, the observation jets are there in actual fact to take samples of the spraying and find out if there's the right mix and the right quantities in the atmosphere. And the public have no idea that this is going on. At least most of them don't. Whenever they spray these things, the sun is reflected back and forth billions of times on these tiny, tiny particles. Therefore, the heat is trapped in underneath this canopy, and the heat builds up. They then use the HARP technologies, which cause thunderstorms, tremendous winds, which can all be read about in the HARP treaty, or the actual weather warfare treaty signed at the United Nations in about 1978. They can cause all of these effects which we're witnessing now, which are all being blamed on global warming, blamed again on us. Most people will buy this because they believe the propaganda. They cannot think for themselves, and even when their perceptions will tell them, if they looked up, that the sky is crisscrossed with trails every day, they still won't believe it. They will deny their own sensibilities and believe the man on television who is more real to them than you, I, or the person next door. That's a sad state of affairs. This is the kind of mind control that Zbigniew Brzezinski was talking about. It's here, and it works. It works very, very well. In Canada here, too, there's a little town not too far from me called Espanola. Espanola was being sprayed back in the 80s by planes that came across the Great Lakes from the U.S., military aircraft. And they're getting sprayed low level daily. The people there were noticing all kinds of strange side effects. And they even noticed that the deer in the forest were having stillbirths. So were the humans. All people were having allergies and coughs and infections, bronchial types infections. The people of Espanola took this to the courts in Canada. The court eventually went to the High Court, the Supreme Court, where it was admitted there was an arrangement between Canada and the U.S. to use Espanola, as guinea pigs. They wouldn't say for what purpose. That's what we mean to our own supposed governments. We are guinea pigs. That same experiment now is happening on a worldwide scale. They had been testing it on the British public too. Look into my website, you'll find some of the stuff on Norwich, when the Navy was spraying stuff off from the sea, and the wind would bring it across this whole massive area. It also had cadmium in it, which was highly carcinogenic. That's what we are to the people who rule our countries. They are not nationals, they are internationals. They're further and even beyond being internationalist. They are utter, complete, psychopathic elitists. And they see us as a complete separate species. They view the peasant of China no higher or lower than the peasant of the US, Canada, Britain, France, or anywhere else. That's the reality. And we better stop falling for all this flag-waving nonsense, because the psychopath knows how to pull out the tribal emblems that have made sure you understand through indoctrination, and they drape themselves with them every time they want you to go off and do their dirty work for them, and you will suffer in the long run, and you will gain nothing from it. That's the sad reality. The public are predictable. It's a science gleaned over centuries and centuries, and maybe thousands of years of studying human personalities and the way that the masses work. That's why so much money and study has gone into anthropology and zoology and all the other ologies to do with behavior, etc. Once you understand it, you can exploit it, and it's been exploited right up to the present time. We are not simply living our lives with drama being thrown at us in fiction and movies for our enjoyment. It certainly keeps us off the streets. But with everything that you watch, there's always a little bit of a program there for you to believe in and reinforced by emotion. That's what fiction's all about. It's called predictive programming. Predictive programming was really hatched out of Tavistock in London, where they knew from World War I that the public would tune in every day to a series of fictional stories if you left them with a cliffhanger every day where the hero was about to be killed or just hanging on or whatever. The people would literally stop all that they were doing and tune in at the same time next day. Well, that was behavior modification, when you're stopped your daily routine from something else which intrudes. That's simple behavior modification. The next part is to get you to emulate and be downloaded with the little ideas that are inserted in the fictional plot. Because if you had a lecture on the same subject, your censor part of your mind is up and on guard. If you think you're being entertained, your shields are down and you're being downloaded. That's also what Brzezinski was referring to with this new mind control system. Most people are living a fantasy. The reality is already a fantasy. They've been brought up in it. There's not hardly anything real in their world. The people themselves and how they interact with each other is not even a natural human way of interaction. Parents hardly even communicate with their children anymore. In fact, they don't know them. Lord Bertrand Russell, once again, in his experimental schools of the early 1900s, where he pushed pre-pubertal sex on the children and was allowed to under authorization of the British Crown, where anybody else doing that would have been in the prison. He said if we can get the children to be promiscuous before puberty and really exaggerate the need for it throughout puberty and into adolescence, he says they will never mate and stay with a single partner for the rest of their life. And so that was part of his agenda. He also talked about the methods of conditioning were so perfect back in the 1920s in his experimental schools that any input the child received from the parents at night on a moral standpoint, he called it contaminated ideas, contaminated old-fashioned ideas, he said it will be a null and void because the scientific technique of indoctrination will overcome it. Well, we've seen that today. Not only have the families been broken up, the age groups are all separated too. This was also part of the other great big experiment, the Soviet Union, which is here, where they said that they'd have to separate the generations. And they did it, of course, by making each one think, this is your generation, this is your music, we'll design this for you. And these are your types of movies. Because they understand that that which is instilled and super driven into the minds of the young is called psychic driving from the experiments at MK Ultra. Will be superimposed in their minds all through their lives. So therefore the generation born with Pink Floyd and so on will always enjoy Pink Floyd till they're very old people. These are all sciences which are perfectly well understood, and the arts and entertainment industries were financed and publicly announced now that the U.S. CIA, the Departments of Culture Creation, not only in the U.S. itself and guided it for the last 50, 60 years, but also financed the same thing in offices across the whole of Europe. Nothing is there by chance. Even the songs you like, even the movies you like, and all the other arts as well. They also wanted to create a form of apathy to break the generations from each other. They said that we could destroy the art of form and belonging by creating nihilistic art beyond even Picasso. And they funded these artists to bring out this kind of stuff and say it was great. And the public will look at it like the king has no clothes and says, yes, I guess it is because you all say so. It must be great stuff. Well, that is your reality. There's hardly a thing in it that's real, even the way you interact with each other today. Sad state of affairs, that's what I mean. Until you realize what you're fighting for and have actually debated what you're fighting for, then you're born to lose. You cannot save a system which has already gone down the tubes. The elite know this too. It wasn't designed to last forever under its present form, and they've already decided what the next phase of the system will be. It's just the present public don't know it yet. They'll only fight to try and stop time with all of its corruption here and now, and they hope, personally, each person hopes they can get through and retire before all hell breaks loose, and maybe die before it breaks loose. Well, we can't sit back and leave it to the next generation. It's up to us now to speak out now and do something about this. Back in a few minutes. Hi, folks. I'm Alan Watts, and this is the last few minutes
there must be some kind of
for today's talk, which is a crammed talk, I guess, because it was all kind of rather spontaneous. And I know there's so much to put in to even a couple of hours, even 3 hours, and you realize the extent and the history, how old this particular agenda is to many of those who helped bring it about. They believed in the human side of it. They fell for it. They fell for the big lies, thinking they were going to create a better world for people, never knowing that the crooks at the top, the psychopathic types, already had it figured out, that once all the hard work was done, they'd simply take it over through the power of the purse, which is the way everything is going today, through licensing, through income taxes, gradually increasing income taxes. And by the way, you don't have to blame the communists for that, because the communists were funded by the West, and the ones who put in the gradually increasing income taxes and property taxes in both Britain and the United States and all the Commonwealth countries, including Canada, was the Royal Institute for International Affairs and the Council on Foreign Relations. Read their histories, their own histories published by themselves, because they proudly admit that, you see. In their world of the future, is to be no private property. It's the same as the United Nations agenda, which is habitat areas where you pay rent only. You'll have no money as you know it today. Money is only a means to an end for the big boys. It's us that are supposed to believe in it. And they're going to give us credits down the road issued by governments, which you cannot save up. You'll use it, and it'll start off with the same amount every week. Again, that was written by Lord Bertrand Russell, in The Impact of Science on Society and in Roads to Freedom. So I hope you've learned something in this fast-going talk to realize how old it is, start questioning your own existence, your own reality, start formulating ways to put across your ideas to other people, because this way has come to the end of the road. We need another way, and you cannot close Pandora's box. You cannot go back to something which was never yours in the first place. It was just as corrupt in your dad's day as it is in yours. We need another way, and it has to come out in dialogue, and not by professional people, but by ordinary people. This has to be discussed with every individual on the planet, because it does affect everybody on the planet. And that's going to take some doing. However, it's the old story, the small things, all great things start with a small step. That's so true. And so it's the wise ones now, with knowledge, who've got to come forward and start the process. The youngsters don't have a chance. Their IQ is actually dropped because of the inoculations they've been given. They have no education, so to speak. They have no historical knowledge as well, except from what they get from Hollywood. And they're very, very confused. The people now, in their middle age and just a bit younger, are the ones that will make the difference now. We're the last generation who can. I hope you've got something out of what I've been talking about today. Please look into my website, cuttingthroughthematrix.com, and listen to my free talks. All the best for now. Alan Watt, over and out.